Hello ladles and jelly spoons, and welcome back to the Shizzle Sticks channel. I must apologise for the lack of uploads recently. There's been a lot going on. Work, personal family troubles, writing a novel funnily enough, room renovations, as well as compiling the slides for this presentation. It's been a bit of a balancing act to say the least, and one that I failed miserably at, but here we are. And on that note, hello and welcome to my Tedtholomew Talk, the SU-57 Fuckwit, Season 1, Episode 7. This is the last episode of this particular season of the Tedtholomew Talk. Now I'd like to preface this by saying that I love the SU-57. It might be built in a damp, mouldy cave, but that's not to say it doesn't look cool. Call it a controversial opinion, but the Sukhoi Design Bureau knows exactly how to make a sexy looking plane. You just need to take a look at the SU-27, the SU-30, the SU-33, the SU-34, the SU-35 and the SU-37. I appreciate they're all flankers, but they all look, chef's kiss. Beautiful, beautiful looking planes. Absolutely a pleasure to watch and look at. Fantastic. But enough grovelling about Sukhoi planes. Let us move on to the SU-57 with its incorporation of advanced composite materials, planform alignment, advanced electro-optical system with IRST, 2 main internal weapons bays that can carry up to 4 R-77s each, 2 side bays that can carry an R-73 each, 3D thrust vectoring, an advanced electronic countermeasures suite, not 1, not 2, but 6 radars embedded into the airframe, including 3 AESA radars dedicated to target acquisition and tracking, all compiled into a super maneuverable 5th generation airframe. This is the SU-57 Felon, a force to be reckoned with. At least that's what's on paper, and what various news outlets would have you think. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, reality is often disappointing. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have already brought up various points, including Sukhoi's luxurious range of countersunk Phillips head screws, or their range of quality glass windows, perhaps even their expertly fitted weapons bay doors, or their top-of-the-line stealthy panelling. And if that wasn't enough, you can wind down your day by the fire. And to top it all off, you have the company. You have company in the form of a wanker that looks more interested in scuttling off to the nearest toilet than he does in the actual aircraft. But the engineer in me has to begrudgingly admit that these pictures are from the 10 prototypes, and the production ones at least seem to be of better quality. Although there's nothing really to say that they didn't just slap a bunch of Bondo on there and call it a day. Or maybe they used egg boxes. I hear they're the fan favourite at the moment for reactive armour. There's also the issue that unlike the J-20 and the F-35, the SU-57 doesn't make use of serrated access panels, at least not to the same extent that these aircraft do. And it doesn't make use of a fibre mat equivalent tape around its panels to diffuse radar waves. And yet, going back to the 10 prototypes, they somehow still managed to fuck up their first production one by crashing it in an accident involving something to do with its flight control services. And before you ask, no, this isn't a new magical, new fancy engine nozzle design. Yes, it is photoshopped, and yes, I have a picture of the actual new engine nozzle design. Notice the serrated edges on the edge of the nozzles. Sukhoi, take note. Do your panels like that and you'll be golden. Now, we've got all of that out of the way. With the prototype stuff, let us begin with the actual more production-y things. First of all, let us address an unexpected elephant in the room. Those 2 side bays, what are they for? Now if you're like me, you think that they're like those found on the F-22 Raptor and house the Soviet equivalent of the AIM-9, aka the R-73, but like me, you're fucking wrong. You see, after many hours of research, I have reasonably concluded that nobody actually seems to know what the fuck these bays are for. They exist, sure, and some people speculate that they're 4R73s, but I can't find a single shred of literature, a verified photograph, or video that states what is carried in these. For all we know, the Michelin Man could be seductively pole dancing in there, and we'd be none the wiser, so good luck sleeping tonight. Now, some people claim that this picture and the video it is from proves the weapons bay's work, but because the video doesn't directly show it, and we know the SU-57 has this pylon adjacent to the alleged internal bay, there's nothing really to suggest it was definitively fired from the internal bay. Possible? Yes. Definitively? Not really. In fact, the only real confirmation of the SU-57 being able to use any of its internal weapons bays is a video from the Russian Defense Ministry Board session where an SU-57 launches what I assume to be a captive or test version of the Kh-59 cruise missile. Allegedly, this took place over Syria, although again, there's nothing outside of hearsay and Russian generals pleasuring each other, which suggests that this footage was taken in Syria. Also begs the question as to why they're using a test version painted in bright red of all colours in a war zone, fired from a stealth aircraft they allegedly want to be discreet with. I believe the aircraft in question is either prototype 509 or production serial number 01, depending on what colour you interpret the belly to be, which actually places them at the scene of the crime. So I guess I'll just go fuck myself then. But putting the strange weapons bays aside for the moment, what about those 6 radars? 6? That's not a number to be sniffed at, given most aircraft only have 1 radar to target with. Allegedly, the Su-57 houses the high-frequency X-band N036 AESA radar in the nose of the aircraft. 2 derivatives of the radar called the... Oh, for fuck's sake. Why can't they just name things normally? Just give them a simple number, maybe add a letter in there and call it a day. You don't need bullshit with dashes, a mix of different various characters. Okay, I'm just going to get on with this. Derivatives of the radar called the N036B-1-01B are located in the cheeks of the nose section, and they're covered on display in what I assume to be cling film. 2 low-frequency L-band radars known as the, for fuck's sake, N036L-1-01 in the leading edges of the wings, and allegedly another X-band radar in the tail, although I can't for the life of me find anything on this elusive quote-unquote radar stored in the back of the aircraft, other than the fact it's designated L402 and is most likely just there for countermeasure purposes, and not so that it can 360 no-scope enemy planes that are behind it like some people might have you believe. So we can immediately discount that one at the rear. In addition to this, why does the Su-57 have these 3 radars positioned at the forward section of the aircraft? The short answer is because it's not on a gimbal like that found on the Eurofighter or the Saab Gripen. This in of itself isn't a problem. Many aircraft, including the F-35 and the Dassault Rafale, use this configuration, but in this particular instance I would argue that less is more. Allow me to explain. As someone that may or may not have some experience in radar cooling, radars not only require copious amounts of power to operate properly, but they also require copious amounts of cooling. Like your computer, lots of power means lots of heat. So, as someone with experience in this, because my current position in the industry may or may not involve me dabbling my toes in said systems, I can't emphasize enough the extent of how much cooling is required on good AESA radars, with the proposed design tolerances often exceeding the capabilities of some of the advanced manufacturing processes required to make said cooling systems, and thus not only have you got to worry about the power for the radars, but also the cooling and heat dissipation of those systems, which can occasionally require tolerancing in excess of 20 thousandths of a millimeter. And given the fact that Russia spent about 10 fucking years struggling to fit some fucking panels properly, it doesn't give me much hope for their radar cooling systems. To add to this, Russia, along with China, is known for making suboptimal engines. Look at most Russian military aircraft engines in flight and you're guaranteed to see it shitting out black smoke at some point or another. Oh shit, that last one's not supposed to be there. Black smoke, long story short, means incomplete combustion, which means inefficiency. For comparison, the alleged numbers for the F-22's engine from the 1980s outputs 26,000 pounds of dry thrust, while the Saturn, oh god, the Saturn is something or other 30 that hasn't even fucking entered service yet, has allegedly 24,300 pounds of dry thrust. So why bring this up? Well, typically, generators or constant speed drive units are attached to engines. It's where the primary power of the aircraft comes from. So if a modern SU-57 engine that has been hasn't even been released into production yet can barely hold a candle to a Western engine from the 1980s, how the fuck do they intend to power 6 radars? I should say 6 quote-unquote radars and their cooling systems with them without some form of compromise with a subpar engine that isn't even operational yet. But let's talk about these L-band radars on the wings. Allegedly, they are for identification of friend or foe as well as electronic warfare, and some sources say they're used for detecting stealth aircraft. Sneaky and innovative. Wow. Now, I'm not going into any details specifically, but it's common internet knowledge that low-frequency radars are pretty good at detecting stealth aircraft, where a stealth aircraft is, and that high-frequency radars aren't, by comparison. The only caveat being that they tell you there's something there, but not exactly where there is. It's a bit like hearing a plane that's very high up fly overhead, but not being able to see where it actually is. You know it's there, you just can't pinpoint exactly where it is until you stare at the sky for 5 minutes. Russia gets around this with their S-400 system by buying cheap tyres from Asda Smart price range, but also by finding an aircraft's position using multiple spaced out radars to triangulate the position of a stealth aircraft. But as you could probably tell, the Su-57's L-band radars aren't exactly spaced out, numerous, or large enough to be useful in any way beyond in any way outside of telling you there's something there. Beyond that, these radars are comparatively small and subsequently probably don't have the effective range required to be useful in detecting stealth aircraft at a distance, let alone triangulate their position. Not to mention it's installed in a fucking control surface. You know, those things that are well known for not moving independently from the aircraft and providing a sufficient level platform on which to transmit from. I question the mindset of people who think that these things are able to detect stealth aircraft. So what do I think? I think the Su-57 has only 3 radars that it can use for detection, those being the 3 at the nose section. And that using all 3 radars at once is impractical in terms of both radar performance and radar cooling, so I believe only 1 radar can be used at any one time, or that using 2 or more of the radars requires an overall reduction in radar performance. I should say this is speculation on my part, but I struggle to see how a Russian aircraft can simultaneously power 3 radars and an advanced electronics detection suite and their cooling system simultaneously with a yet-to-be operational engine that at best rivals something from the 1980s. At least not without a goat having to be sacrificed somewhere along the line. But going back to the wings again, in terms of the jammer, it's probably pretty shit too. AESA radars are great for using different frequencies simultaneously, which is very useful if you want to pollute the shit out of detection systems with stupid amounts of noise. But my issue is the frequency range. The ALQ-99 jammer used on the EA-18Gs and the EF-111s has a frequency range of between 64 MHz and up to 20 GHz. By comparison, an L-band radar typically operates between 1 and 2 GHz. So even as a jammer, it's probably not great, which makes me think its primary function is as an identification friend or foe system first, and maybe a wish.com jammer second. I could be wrong about the frequency range, but I'm working with limited information. But worse still, engaging any one of these radars has the very real potential to passively give away the position of the stealth aircraft, which can then be fired upon with the use of home-on radiation or home-on-jam missiles like the AMRAAM, which have less chance of a successful hit but are still a very real threat regardless. And all of this isn't even taking into account the restrictions Russia is facing with regards to semiconductor materials, such as gallium nitride and gallium arsenide, that Russia imports conveniently from other countries that, funnily enough, aren't too happy about Russia invading Ukraine. Countries like South Korea, America, Japan, Taiwan, the UK, and all of the countries in the EU. And AESA radars require advanced semiconductors, so not only is Russia putting all of their eggs in the AESA radar basket, but they're doing so in a time when they really can't afford to, which is probably why Russia have an impressive grand total, according to Wikipedia, of 10 serial production SU-57s. Moreover, half of the people with the brains to produce such materials domestically have probably fled the country by now to greener pastures. Perhaps they don't appreciate having to shit outside. Moving on to the IRST sensor, the thing can't be used properly without partially giving away its position, and I say that because it has to be turned around facing towards the actual aircraft in order to not reflect any radar waves, which rather defeats the point of a passive sensor when you think about it. And that's assuming that the system is all it's cracked up to be. Recent informative and unfortunate occurrences have resulted in some embarrassment to Russia with their top-tier Orlan-10 surveillance drone using not-so-top-tier mid-range consumer-grade Western electronics. And if a dedicated $100,000 military surveillance drone is fitted with that, one can only speculate if the SU-57 uses a Fujifilm Instax Mini in Flamingo Pink. Of course, we could verify this with this image taken from a Panasonic Lumix MiG-35, but the fucking thing's facing the wrong way in the last-ditch attempt to hide what it can of its radar cross-section. All in all, if the SU-57 is all it's cracked up to be, it's probably a formidable opponent, but given Russia has yet to send it into Ukraine, it shows it probably isn't. Maybe Russia is playing it cautious due to their low numbers, or maybe they lack the confidence in its ability. But Putin and his band of mildly constipated stroke victims claim Ukraine is a very real threat. In fact, the Cringe Patrol seems to think it's filled to the brim with terrorists and Nazis that need to be neutralised from the slimy hands of the West, and goes so far as to threaten the use of nuclear weapons, mobilise over 200,000 civilians and strain their economic relations with allied nations. And yet, the multi-million-dollar SU-57 has remained firmly within Russia's borders throughout it all, a self-proclaimed technical marvel designed to take on the world, only to never leave the borders of which it was birthed from during its time of need, a stealth fighter reduced to pathetically lobbing missiles from within its own country. How ironic. And on that note, ladles and jelly spoons, I present to you the SU-57 Fuckwit. Also, as a little bit of a bonus, the reason that Russia is invested in super maneuverable aircraft is because they can't compete with Western engines. They don't have the same sort of thrust to weight ratio. The more you know. And on that note, ladles and jelly spoons, goodbye and thanks for watching.